The Czech heavies have been in World of Tanks for quite a while, and today's video is going to look at the lowest Czech heavy, the VZ44-1, as we progress through the tech tree, and we're going to see how this thing can actually compare against a lot of the other tier 7 heavy tanks. And of course, this is a tank, in my personal opinion, that is very disappointing, at least from a regard of being able to carry games, although this replay right here shows what happens when you get into a game that is actually not that disfavourable. If you are top tier in this thing, you can have good results, but it is not a tank that does very well when you are in those higher tier matchups. The tank itself has 320 alpha damage. It has okay view range for a heavy tank. It's very much like a, I don't know, it's kind of like a medium heavy. Think of it like a hammer, where you have very good gun handling when you do kind of get into a position and you're not having to move all of the time, but you don't really have armor, and for the most part you really shouldn't be playing it like that. Now, this gameplay on Redshire it's not the worst map for the tank, and I guess we still make it work nonetheless. Now, we could go over to the left hand side as with the other heavies, but as we've noted already, this tank is not particularly your traditional heavy tank. As with a lot of the Czech heavies, albeit as they get further on in the tech tree line, you'll notice that they do kind of change a little bit as you go through, and it becomes a little bit more traditional heavy armor. However, this thing is kind of like the transition between, think of it like a VTU version of the Czech heavies, and therefore is not necessarily the funnest to play. However, I want to see what you guys actually think of this tank in the comments, because for me, the VZ44 is a tank that I've not necessarily found too hard to play, but I've definitely found it a bit annoying in certain scenarios to perform as well as you might want to. Now, you can see here what we're doing is just cresting ridge lines. We can use the auto aim. The kind of accuracy of this tank is not awful, and therefore you can have good games. Thing is that you do end up kind of sacrificing quite a bit with this tank. Yes, you are not necessarily the slowest tank, but you're not necessarily fast either. So yeah, you trade the speed of having like the top end speed of a medium tank to be able to get this. You also lose the armor of the heavy, so it's kind of almost like a hybrid between a heavy and a medium. There's not really a class that I would define this as, because you don't have, you've got no best of both worlds. You don't have the armor for the heavy tank like you would expect, but you don't have the speed like you'd expect from a medium, and you don't have the flexibility. The gun handling isn't perfect like a medium. Yeah, it's just kind of very mediocre in all regards, but not terrible at any one thing. So for those of you that want to actually grind down the Czech heavies, don't take this tank as kind of the inclination, because as you progress through, you'll notice that the tanks get significantly better. They become more and more carryable within the game. I don't even know if that's a word, but we're going to use it either way. And it means that you can just have results that are a bit more kind of unique to these tanks, where you have the double barrel. Of course, this tank does not feature the elusive double barrel mechanic that all of the Czech heavies have from this tier and above, and that means that you don't really have any pack-a punch to really negate a lot of the tanks from pushing towards you or doing anything like that. Now, somehow we managed to bounce off of the VZ, no idea how, but you know, makes sense. Either way, we'll fully aim this shot and we'll put one into him. Somehow misses once again. It's just like an absolute meme at this point, but not. Hopefully we'll be able to finish him off here, get the final damaging hit, and then we can kind of move on with our day, which we do manage to do from the front of the turret. Couldn't do it on the side, but there you go. From this area on Redshire, we've pretty much won the game. There's no way we're really going to lose. Of course, we love it when you can auto-aim the artillery piece, which is the best tank that I like taking out. We go for the shot on the charioteer, who is still in the same position. We're going to now move forward. We can advance. Hopefully we can get a shot on the charioteer as we're kind of going forward. If we don't, not the worst thing in the world. We go for the little auto-aim snapshot, which you can do. You know, it was mainly just because we know he's going to get taken out. It's more about just trying to push out as much damage as possible. And then we finally finish off the Churchill 7 because of the DPM of the tank enabling us to reload quickly enough to finish off the last couple of enemies within this replay. And of course, it showcases what happens in kind of a very favourable matchup where the tank can perform, but I kind of want to showcase what the tank can do in a less favourable matchup where maybe it doesn't all go as planned. And you can see within this one we managed to get some assistance damage as well for tracking and also spotting for our team. Now the next gameplay we have is on Canals, and a map that could be very good for this tank. You can definitely perform in a medium heavy type playstyle on Canals. It's probably the best class you could possibly be, to be honest with you, because you have both close quarters engagements and you also have the ability to spot, and you have a variety of extra things. And I think that actually the spotting of this tank is one of the most underrated things that this has, which enables it to do a lot more spotting than traditional heavy tanks. And so getting out spotting in this thing is, yes, you're still going to get outspotted by light tanks, but you know, that's the same for pretty much every tank that plays against the light tank if you're playing in a heavy. But this one can actually spot in most regards, and often if the light tank is going to fire at you, you are going to be able to spot him directly straight away back, which is always good. Now, one position that I want to highlight within this replay that you can use in any tank that is basically a medium or anything with okay view range is to go into this position. Now this position offers the ability to spot a lot of the crossing tanks. You're able to get some shots into them, and you can see here we pick up a nice damaging hit at the beginning of this game on the VK. We also get some assistance damage as our team decide to punish those that have decided to cross. And if we can just continually respot, we spot the hammer, we spot in all of these tanks as they're kind of moving forward, and if we can get damage on them, that's perfect. Now we hit the IKV, who's pulled back way too far, and then he gets removed very quickly, and you can see already we've picked up a nice 700 hit points worth of spotting damage, and then we finish off the VK, who definitely pushed up a little bit too far for that tier 6. Now, albeit this tank can be very good at spotting, you still get spotted most of the time, so it's all about making sure that you aren't pushing it too aggressively. Don't go into a position where if you get spotted you're going to get ruined. It's not going to be able to remain hidden, but what it can do is obviously spot the opponents that are going to be able to spot you at the same time. That's kind of where this tank lies. It's not a traditional spotter. You have to be very picky as to where you go to spot opponents. Now, that is the same for most heavy tanks in the game. You can still spot, you can still get assistance damage. It's just about being very much picky. Now, unfortunately, we accidentally ram into that guy, and obviously say sorry, that wasn't intentional. And we're just going in now to get better angles on this hammer, and of course the KV-85, who's also sat in this position. It's kind of an annoying position to kind of dig out. Yes, we could go to the right, and yes, we could be able to hopefully get some extra damage. Now, that doesn't appear to be possible at this moment in time because we don't know what's going to be around behind us, and of course a lot of the opponents are actually going to be moving through the town area where we initially spawned. Now, if that happens, we want to be able to kind of turn around and deal with them as and when we need to. Now, we bounce around, and that is actually a round that it's probably the first one that we've seen, to be honest, bouncing off of this tank. And yeah, that pretty much sums up what this tank is all about. It is not a tank that does particularly well at all when it starts receiving any hits in the game. I mean, most tanks don't, to be honest with you, but this one especially, like, you are not going to be able to bounce many at all. Now, what we have to do in matchups like this, where it appears like we're probably going to lose, the enemy team have basically taken the entire side and it's looking that way. I'm trying to pull back, but unfortunately this guy sat right behind me. I'm trying to pull back, but it still doesn't happen. Nonetheless, we managed to bounce around, which was a bit lucky, but definitely shouldn't have had to even actually bounce that. Not going to complain too much, but we can kind of turn around and make the most of the scenario that we've got. Now, the enemy team, as I expected, have pushed across this side. We put a nice one into the Panzer 4H then. The T-23E3 decides he's going to throw himself away, but just YOLOing in. Don't quite know what this guy is thinking, but yes, losing literally 3/4 of your hit points is a very good idea. The T-25AT that we saw earlier decides to push up, and in this sort of scenario we just need to deal the damage, and yes, we may take a few hits, but that doesn't really matter. The T-3488 is definitely a tank that is pretty devastating, to be honest with you, and can be a real nuisance. The T-25AT, we want to make sure that we can get hits into him. We place a nice one and put him on a one shot. Now it's just about removing as many damaging hits as possible. And unfortunately we managed to bounce the second one, which is really annoying. We've got plenty of tanks coming around from behind, the Tiger 1, which is annoying. We prioritise the tanks that are going to be annoying for us as well, so it's all about target selection. The T25AT, we need to get him out the game if possible. Try and put a round into him, unfortunately it doesn't work, and now we have a T3488 that we do actually manage to set on fire and finish him, which I always like, but unfortunately we don't manage to win the game yet. We still pick up 3000 damage, and this is what this tank can do, even in these matchups where your team just don't quite get it in the matchup, you can still perform. However, that pretty much showcases that even in the top tier games, this tank is not particularly the best for carrying. It doesn't have the armor to be able to do so, and unfortunately we do lose this battle. But there you go, a kind of holistic view of the VZ44-1. We aren't top tier in either of them, so that showcases, you know, this tank does not do very well in tier 9 matchups, but hopefully gave you a good indication of what the Czech heavies aren't as they go through. This is kind of the unique, it's kind of one of the worst tier 7 heavies in the game in my personal opinion. Yes, it can be played okay, but I just don't think it has enough of anything to really make it that stand out. It's very average, but hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to like the video and also check out some of the other gameplay videos that we have on the channel. I really do hope that you check those out. Really good to learn about the game and get kind of your knowledge base up, and of course it helps me out as well. So thank you very much for watching, hope to see you in one of those, and I'll see you there. Goodbye.